James Ernest, Gruel and Truth Radio Network, here with Ian O'Connor, author of the new book, Belichick, The Making of the Greatest Football Coach of All Time. So tell us about your interest and intensity in doing the research for this book.
Well, James, I interviewed 350 people to try to get at the heart of who Belichick is, not just as a coach, but as a human being. And he didn't cooperate. And he actually he asked some of his friends not to cooperate as well. But I was determined to paint a full human portrait of the man, and I think I did that in this book. It's not the easiest thing in the world to humanize someone who has no interest in being publicly humanized. But that was important to me as part of the process of writing about and illustrating how this person became the greatest NFL coach ever. And I think I pulled that off. I guess I will let the reader ultimately be the judge of that.
Yeah, I mean, I get if he's, wanting to hide his strategy for the upcoming week at football, but it's just overwhelming how he doesn't want to let anybody in on anything, it seems.
Yeah, that's his, it's intentional. He's created this one-dimensional character he plays on TV in his news conferences at the podium. And according to people I talk to who know him, it's strategic, that he believes that we're in the business of collecting and gathering information. We're not in the business of sharing it. And so therefore he's going to set that organizational tone. And even if America despises him and that act, he doesn't really care. He thinks it helps him win football games because he's giving minimal amounts of information. He wants his players to do the same. He knows his players watch those news conferences. So, and I know for a fact that he believes he has competed against coaches over the years who have given away too much during the week in the news media clippings that Bill will read, whether it be on the internet or printouts. And he believes he has discovered information about game plans and teams that he's playing that coming Sunday, and he's used that information against those coaches. So he wants to run a program that does the opposite of that. And he's done it very successfully since 2001, and arguably, anyway, has built the greatest dynasty the NFL has ever seen.
How close was he to giving up football?
Well, I don't think he was close to giving up football. This offseason, it was a pretty turbulent offseason, certainly by their standards, in that Tom Brady was very angry over a few things. One, the benching of Malcolm Butler in the Super Bowl. The way Bill had coached him in an unrelenting, unforgiving way for 18 years caught up to Brady, and also the treatment of his trainer and business partner, Alex Guerrero. Belichick cut team access to Guerrero. That really angered Brady. So my sources told me in late March even, Brady was considering walking away rather than playing another season for his head coach. I don't think Belichick was ever close to walking away, but their transactional partnership had to survive that meltdown last season, and in the offseason, it barely survived it. And I think now, Bill's a young 66. I think he's going to coach a lot of years still, and I think Brady's got a lot of football left in him too. So I think they'll be together likely for another 4 or 5 years. I think the one alternate scenario for Belichick would be handing off the team to Josh McDaniels, the offensive coordinator, and Bill becomes president of football operations for the final 3-4 years of his career. But other than that, I think he's going to be the coach of the Patriots for seasons to come.
Oh, I don't mean like recently thinking about giving it up. I mean either back in his Winthrop days or the Cleveland Brown days, prior to any of this, his legend, his legacy, his New York Giant. Well, no, it'd been after the Giants, but prior to any of that, where we wouldn't be talking about him today. Were there ever times that he ever thought about giving up football back then?
There was only one time when he was at Wesleyan University in Connecticut. And he was a backup center on the football team. And because Bill grew up in a football household, his dad had been a longtime assistant coach at the Naval Academy. So he saw his father, how much he loved the sport and the craft of coaching and scouting. His dad was one of the best advanced scouts in America. And Bill gravitated toward that because he saw his father's passion for it. And I think at Wesleyan, sophomore year, he was in a practice, and the coaching staff, particularly one coach in particular, thought that they could block the extra point kick attempted by the opponent that they were going to play that Saturday. So they practiced it. And the way they practiced it was they brought in the backup center, who happened to be Belichick. They lined up 3 defenders on the other side of him, and they had defenders basically steamroll Belichick in this drill time after time after time. I'm talking 10 to 12 times. And finally his leg snapped. Oh. And he was so angry about it and so disillusioned with the staff and really the sport, he walked away from football for like a year and a half. And I think most people who observe Belichick today and know him would have a hard time believing he could be without football for more than a year. But he did. He walked away. Now, he never went to the administration of Wesleyan and complained about it or tried to get that coach fired. He just, in his words or in his mindset, sucked it up and moved on. He came back to play for his senior year. Didn't get much playing time. He wasn't a very athletic kid. But that was the only time in his life where he did without football, and he was very disillusioned with the sport.
With being such a fascinating figure, but yet being so hidden, is that really, I feel that adds a lot of relevance to the book, that this is the only chance or the only way someone could get to actually really learn about the true Bill Belichick.
Well, that was my intent in starting this project 3 years ago, and it was a 3-year grind. There were a lot of blood, sweat, and tears spilled, and I, again, interviewing 350 people. Now, Belichick did not cooperate. I entered the project assuming that would probably be the case. So I worked around that as best I could. In fact, he put some obstacles in front of me. He asked some of his friends not to talk as well. And I feel like that's what he does to his players. He puts challenges and obstacles in front of them to try to make them better. And in some ways, I think he made me a better reporter by not cooperating, because I had to dig deeper and mine more sources than maybe I would have. But my goal with this project was to show the complete human being and the person away from the stadium who's entirely different. It's a Jekyll and Hyde act. And I think most of America would be surprised that Bill is very capable of acts of common decency and kindness and generosity. Generosity might be his best trait, going back even to his Cleveland days. So that I wanted to show the human being, and I believe I accomplished that in this portrait.
Does he have any peers in coaching? I mean, other than, like how Tiger Woods, you have to talk about Jack Nicholson, or Nicholas, my bad, to get a comparison. With Belichick, do you have to talk about Vince Lombardi as opposed to anybody current?
Well, I attended the high school in New Jersey where Vince Lombardi coached, St. Cecilia's in Englewood, New Jersey. So it's hard for me to put somebody above Lombardi, but I do it with Belichick because the time and place in which he accomplished what he did. Now, if Vince Lombardi lived, tragically he died young because of cancer. Had he lived and won a couple of championships in Washington, which he probably would have, maybe we're having a different conversation. But Belichick, the duration of his career, the fact that he's won 5 championships and 15 division titles at a time when the NFL is designed to prevent him from doing exactly what he's done, build a dynasty. The schedule, the draft, free agency, salary cap, all those things are in place to drag teams at the top back to the middle, if not the bottom, and to elevate teams at the bottom towards the top. He has raged against that system very successfully, and I think particularly with free agency, something Lombardi didn't have to deal with, Paul Brown didn't have to deal with, George Halas did not have to deal with. I think you have to give Belichick the nod, and I actually believe he's going to win one more. I think he's got 6 in them with Brady, and I suspect that will happen over the next 2 to 3 years.
Why did things not work in Cleveland? I mean, he had Nick Saban with him. That should have been gold, I would think.
All right, Saban is probably the greatest college coach ever. And they were a quite a tandem in '94. That was the one good year Bill had out of 5 in Cleveland. They went 11-5. Saban was the defensive coordinator. They beat Parcells and the Patriots in the playoffs. They had it going. Then, of course, the following season, Art Modell, the owner, announced he was moving to Baltimore, and that was that. But Saban was frustrated with Belichick on 2 fronts. One, it's kind of funny given the way he runs his Alabama program. He wanted to talk more to the media, and Bill restricted media access to his assistants. He didn't want them talking. Saban wanted to talk more to get his name out there for head coaching opportunities, so he was frustrated with that. But he was also frustrated that during the week in practice, they would run exotic schemes on defense, blitzing a lot. And during games, he felt on Sundays, Belichick was way too conservative. And he would complain in conversations with Rod Burnett, who was a Pro Bowl defensive end under Saban, many times Burnett told me Saban would express his frustration with Belichick over the conservative nature of the game plan. So he was ready to move on at the end of the 94 season, and he did, and he went to Michigan State as head coach. And then in 95, Saban not being there definitely hurt Bill when things started to fall apart.
Which Super Bowl victory of his was the most important?
I think you have to say the first one. It was an epic upset over the Rams, who were considered almost unbeatable with that offense. And it established that Belichick could do it, right? He was a great coordinator under Bill Parcells with the Giants and winning 2 Super Bowls. But people in the Giants organization, obviously all of Cleveland, felt he would never be a successful head coach. George Young was the GM of the Giants, told people, this man will never be my head coach. And the Giants, not just the Cleveland Browns and Art Modell, but after the failures there, but the Giants, the Mara family, George Young, the GM, who's a borderline Hall of Famer, they never believed Bill would be a successful head coach because they didn't think he had the charisma and leadership personality like Parcells to pull it off. They were dead wrong. And I think Bill proved it to himself, and he proved it to really the rest of the league, that he could lead a team to a championship. And that first one sets up the second and the third. If you're going to ask me after the first one what's the next most important, it's probably the Seattle Super Bowl, because they hadn't won since 2004. They win in 2014 after Deflategate breaks out. And that was their first championship even since Spygate in 2007. So I think that meant a ton to his legacy and the Brady's, because if they lose that game, if Malcolm Butler doesn't make the interception at the goal line, they would have lost 3 straight Super Bowls, and their legacy, I think, would be entirely different.
Yeah, they would start to feel more Buffalo Bills, I would say.
Which is a harsh thing to say about people who had won 3 Super Bowls, right?
Exactly.
But you're right. The questions would be, well, you guys haven't won the big one in 10 years. You haven't won since Spygate. Now that the Deflategate thing happens and you didn't win after that. And that's a harsh standard to judge them by. But it's almost like they're a victim of their early success in that regard. But, hey, Butler made the play. And frankly, if you recall, Tom Brady gave Butler his truck as Super Bowl MVP. And because Brady knew how important that was to his legacy as a winner. Well, that's why one of the reasons why Brady was so upset when Butler was benched in the Super Bowl loss to Philadelphia, along with the vast majority of his teammates. So that led to the fracture. That was one of the reasons that there was a fracture in the Brady-Belichick relationship last year and last offseason.
What were Belichick's opinions on Brady's innocence or guilt with the Deflategate?
Well, in the early days of it, he had serious doubts, and he wasn't alone. There were people in the organization who really wondered about, particularly after Brady's press conference, where that was a very wobbly, indecisive performance. And when he was asked rather dramatically, America wants to know, is Tom Brady a cheater? He gave a very indecisive, I don't believe so answer, which sort of convicted him in the court of public opinion, outside of New England anyway. So when some science came in, specifically New England-based science, suggesting that the ideal gas law may be accounted for all of this, I think Belichick and the rest of the organization rallied around that and sort of put aside their doubts about Brady's story. But there were some hurt feelings from that. I know the Brady camp was not happy that Belichick sort of dropped that crisis in the quarterback's lap. And ultimately, Brady and his family and friends were not happy when Kraft surrendered to the league in the spring of 2015 as far as not fighting that, at least not initially fighting that Brady suspension. So they recovered from it. They won again. And but I think it was the drafting of Jimmy Garoppolo in the spring of 2014 which led to last year's confrontation between the quarterback and the head coach. And I think once Garoppolo was drafted, that confrontation was bound to happen.
Were most of the scandals with the Patriots real, or were most of them exaggerated?
Well, Spygate was very real. Deflategate depends on your opinion. Whether or not if you side with the science, if you lean on the science, you can side with the team. If you lean on the circumstantial evidence, you're going to side with the league. So that case is really more of an opinion case, really. I think Spygate is a fact case. They were caught. They admitted it. Now, Belichick has said he misinterpreted the rule, and I don't know anyone around the league who believes that. I'll say this. After studying Belichick and his program and his dynasty for 3 years and talking to 350 people for this book, I don't think Spygate gave him that great of an advantage, and I'm surprised after Eric Mangini warned him not to do it in the Jets building, Giant Stadium, in 2007, that he did it anyway. I just thought the risk of getting caught and the damage that did to the brand and his own reputation, historically, I didn't think it was worth it. Bill was right when he later said 80,000 people can see the coach giving the signals. So they filmed it to streamline the process of gathering information, and I really don't think it gave him a significant enough advantage to take that gamble.
I wonder if I could tell that to a law officer. Yeah, officer, I misunderstood the speed limit.
Right. Well, yeah, that one, I think Gary Myers had this in his book a few years ago, that Kraft sat down Kraft sat down Belichick, and he said, all right, how much did this really help us on a scale of 1 to 100? And Belichick said 1. And then Kraft said, then you're a real schmuck for doing this. And again, how about shutting down the operation for a week after Mangini issues the warning? I have an interesting story in the book that's never been reported before about Spygate. And that day in Giant Stadium, the season opener 2007, the camera is confiscated. And it ends up in a back office of Giant Stadium. And the Jets have 2 officials in a room, and the Patriots security chief, Mark Briggs, a British Army veteran, is in there fighting the Patriots fight, saying, you're stealing our camera, we want it back. And 3 people were in the middle of this dispute, an FBI agent, an undercover cop who had infiltrated the Genovese crime family, and a New Jersey state trooper, and they became the referees. They were the judge and jury, and listened to the Patriots' argument to get the camera back, and listen to the Jets' argument, which was this is corporate espionage, we want this camera in the hands of the NFL. And after about 25 minutes, those 3 men in the middle, Pat Aramini, Bob Bukowski, and Jim Cran, they're the ones never been reported before who decided to give the camera to the NFL. If they had given that camera back to the Patriots, Belichick shuts down the operation forevermore, and Spygate never happens.
Oh, wow. Yeah, so it could.
And by the way, that's the case that really, as you know, changed the way America looked at Belichick and his organization. So you just always wonder if that day had gone differently. I think Bill would have said, "Okay, enough's enough. Let's not do this anymore. We're going to get caught." And I just think things would have been different in terms of perception, coast to coast.
You mentioned about how his relationship with Giants ownership or Cleveland ownership hasn't always been the steadiest. But for the most part, though, his relationship with Robert Kraft, other than some of those incidences, would you say they have been a really strong relationship?
Well, the Cleveland relationship was bad. Art Modell was a New York PR guy, and Bill was like the opposite of that. The Giant relationship was always good. They always thought he was one of the 3 best assistants they ever had, along with Tom Landry and Vince Lombardi. But they just didn't see him as a head coach. But the Mara family always really liked Bill, and I think Bill returned the sentiment. Kraft, it's been like with Brady, transactional. There hasn't been really any love there, but the partnership has worked. Kraft hired Bill when everyone around the league was telling him not to do it, including Art Modell and George Young. I wrote a column back in 2000 saying it was a bad hire, and that column has haunted me for 18 years, but there were a lot of people who felt that way. And Kraft believed in him, and he was right, and probably belongs in the Hall of Fame for making that decision. So there are times when Bill walks down the hallway and Kraft will pass him, and here's a man paying him millions of dollars every year, and he doesn't even say hello. But that's Bill. He does that with everybody. When he's at the workplace and he's engrossed in thought about a scheme or a game plan, he's not going to waste 3 seconds making small talk. So Kraft has learned to live with that. And one league official told me for the book that Kraft is probably the only owner in the NFL who could have put up with Bill's quirks for 18 years, and he's probably right.
I mean, just think about it. Last week we were looking at it. Patriots were 2-1, Dolphins were 3-0, and it was the end of the dynasty. And then one week later, it's completely different. Would you agree, or is that just overreacting?
No, I think, in September, they always have issues. And Belichick treats September as if it's an extension of the preseason. I don't think he'd ever say that, but last year they were 2-2, and they went to the Super Bowl. So they've had these in 2014. They get blown out in Kansas City. People are worried that Brady is slipping, and they win the Super Bowl that year. So I think this roster looks a little thin to me relative to New England standards, but I think they're going to win the division again. I think they'll be in the hunt again. I don't know if they'll win it all with this group, but I think they'll contend, and I wasn't overly concerned. Now, had they lost to the Dolphins, that would have been a different story. But, of course, the Dolphins on cue didn't show up, and I think at 3-0, the Dolphins not used to being the hunted and being in position where the Patriots are looking up at them, just had a lot of trouble handling that burden, and just shows you how great the Patriots have been to dominate that division since 2001. It's not easy to do that, and Belichick has pulled it off anyway.
You mentioned interviewing 350 people. Obviously, we can't thank all of them, but who are some of the people that you would like to thank for their help with the book?
Well, a lot of those people can't be named, frankly, because Belichick was not cooperating. They knew that, and so I need to protect them. And there are some people who felt they were sort of putting their necks on the line talking to me because Bill at times can be a punitive guy. So I'll just say to those who really wanted to help Bill and humanize him, I really thank them. They know who they are, and they trusted me, and I think I repaid that trust by delivering what I said I was going to deliver, and that is a very fair portrait of the man, and that's really how I want people to see it, whether they see it as positive or negative. There's both in the book, but fair, and I think it is as fair a book as anyone could write about Belichick.
So where can people get the book?
Amazon.com and bookstores everywhere. It's been out since September 25th. Sales have been very robust, and hopefully that will continue.
Excellent. And then if fans are wanting to find out more about you and the book on social media and a website, where would you recommend?
Yeah, thank you. On Twitter, it's Ian_O'Connor, no apostrophe. My website is Ian-O'Connor, no apostrophe.com. And there's more information about the book there. And again, I really hope, because I know a lot of the publicity has been about Belichick and Brady and Kraft and their relationship. This book is 455 pages and 213,000 words about an epic football life and the development of a human being. And I hope Patriots fans get a chance to see it that way. That's the way it was intended.
I'd like to thank our guest today, Ian O'Connor, author of Belichick, The Making of the Greatest Football Coach of All Time. Thank you, Ian.
Thanks, James. Take care.
My pleasure.